All right, welcome into Ethan Skolnick Starting Nine here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. I'll be with you until 9:30, or you could be calling this up at any point in the day. We appreciate Manny Chang producing for us this morning. I'll be with you tomorrow as well. Tomorrow we're going to talk Heat. Obviously, the Heat open on Thursday night against the Bucks. We'll have full coverage of that from our crew. Alex Toledo and I will actually be at the arena. And today I will be at the arena for Pat Riley's press conference at 2 o'clock. So that's probably something that we will discuss tomorrow on the show. Before we get to the show, though, we've got something for you to do today, okay? Little to-do list. 1, sign up for Underdog Fantasy, okay? It's really, really simple. Just go to underdogfantasy.com, download the app, and basically you're going to jump right on there and you're going to see all the cool stuff that they've got. Make your deposit using this code 5RSN. That's the code 5RSN. You deposit today, they'll just give you $10. And here's the thing, that may not seem like a lot, but a lot of the games that you can play on there are like $3, $5, whatever. So like you can play 2 $5 games. My math is okay this early in the morning, for what you get simply for signing up. And they've got a couple of cool things going on right now with the NBA. They've got the best ball, but you got to get in there before tonight. Okay, so you can pick your entire team for the season. For the entire season, you're not going to have to go in and play with waivers or anything like that. But you got to get in before tonight because the season actually opens tonight, even though the Heat don't open until Thursday. Okay, so make sure that you get in there. There's still room in there for huge prizes, but also going to be running drafts during the day. Okay, those drafts can be 3-player, 5-player, 10-player, 12-player. I've been running some 10-player $3 drafts. Okay, so look for those on Twitter. Once you're signed up with that code 5RSN, then you can draft with us. I already got Greg and some of the other guys from our network we're in the queue waiting to draft against you. You just haven't signed up yet. So go to Underdog Fantasy, use the code 5RSN. That's the way to get your $10. All right, but today we're going to talk a little bit of NFL or whatever it is that the Dolphins are competing in these days. I was going through the numbers, and I mean, there's no other way to put this. The Dolphins are one of the 2 worst teams in the league right now. And they're the worst team in their division, which is remarkable because the Jets are in it. But if you look at point differential for this season, the Dolphins are minus 78. The only team worse are the Texans. Remember the Texans? The team that we've been laughing at for the past couple of years, right? Bill O'Brien selling off all his players. Chris Greer hoodwinked him, right, by getting all the draft picks for Laramie Tunsil, right? Okay, and, I mean, they're an embarrassment, right? The Texans, their quarterback is on the roster but isn't playing, right, has this cloud over him. They're holding out for a ridiculous ransom to try to get him traded somewhere else. The Texans, that's the only team in the Dolphins class right now. I mean, we could talk about the Lions and not winning and all the rest of that, but I mean, from a point differential perspective, the Lions are better than the Dolphins right now. They're better. They've been closer on their games. And yes, I know the Dolphins, again, they won their opening game in New England, and yes, that's one of the 2 games that Tua has played. We've seen since that the Patriots really aren't so good, which, I mean, we could have told you before the season. We did tell you before the season. It's one of the reasons I picked the Dolphins in that opening game. They're 2-4 right now. The Dolphins have lost to the Colts, who are not that good. They've lost to the Jaguars, who prior to playing the Dolphins were winless and were considered to be the worst team in the league. We just have to accept it. Like, we could talk about particular players in the Dolphins who may be making progress or this or that or the other thing, but the Dolphins really are right back where they were 2 years ago, right? I mean, they started that season, what was it, 0-7? And then they finished 5-4, and they had all this momentum, and Flores was doing a great job, and then they go 10-6 last year and just missed the playoffs if they're starting 10-5, and high hopes for this year. And I made the sucker bet. I mean, I knew it when I was doing it. You know, when you're doing something, you just know it's a bad idea, but you're like, okay, my heart, I'll do it. And I went over on the 9.5 for the Dolphins, even though I've been around long enough. Okay, I'm old, and I've covered the Dolphins in some capacity since 1997. All right. So I know that they can't stand prosperity, and that as soon as they go up, they're going to come back down. They are the Knicks. I'm sorry to tell Dolphin fans this. You are Knicks fans. It's the exact same thing. And I grew up a Knicks fan, so I know what this is like, okay? Like, you're living in the 70s, right? Well, I mean, none of you were born in the 70s, right? but you're living in the 70s. Mike, that may be true. If Tua plays all the games, they might be 3-3. They still wouldn't let him play, though. All right. I mean, the assumption, and I'll get back to the Knicks analogy in a second, but I want to get to Mike's point here. The assumption that they would be 3-3 with Tua is to make the assumption that they would allow him to play quarterback during those games. And I don't think they would, right? We just saw it. I mean, he played in the Jacksonville game, right? He played well enough to win. They didn't let him play quarterback at the end of the game. They don't trust him. It's obvious at this point. I mean, what you and I think of him, they don't, okay? It's obvious. But getting back to the Knicks analogy, right? Living in the 70s, okay? Right? For the Dolphins, 72, 73, right? Those 2 years. For the Knicks, 70 and 73, those 2 years, right? The greatness of Willis Reed, the greatness of Bob Greasy and whatever, okay? Larry Zonka, etc. Living in the past, all right? Then the 80s and the 90s, competitive teams for the most part. The Knicks, it took a little bit longer, but after they drafted Ewing in 85, the Dolphins drafted Marino, right, in 83, right? Both of them had Hall of Fame careers, not at the same level. Patrick is not at Dan's level, but great careers, okay? Icons of their cities, right? Patrick Ewing, still one of the most popular people in New York. We saw that last year with Georgetown when they went up to MSG. Dan is Dan, right? Never won. I mean, they didn't win anything, but both of them reached the finals of their sport. The Dolphins, obviously Marino was early, reaching the Super Bowl, losing to Montana. And Ewing was later, losing to Olajuwon. But both of them reached the pinnacle. And he didn't really lose to Olajuwon. John Starks did. Okay? And Pat did. I mean, let's be honest. Okay, so 80s and 90s, that's what you have. Competitive teams, people think that they're better. The fans want to believe they're better than they are, right? And then you get into the 2000s, okay? And yes, with the Knicks, you had the Jeff Van Gundy years, which were pretty good, right? They reached the finals in 99. Kind of a fluky thing. I mean, not flukier in my view, actually, than the bubble season was for the Heat. Kind of fluky. They were the 8th seed. They beat the Heat. They always beat the Heat in the playoffs. So they beat them 3 out of 4 times, 3 out of 4 series. They beat the Heat, and they get all the way to the finals. That was the year that they probably shouldn't have been the 8th seed, but it was a lockout shortened season. And then they get there with Sprewell and Houston and Campy. Remember? Okay. So, and then they fell apart, right? Don Nelson comes in, and it's been 20 years of trash for the most part. And the Dolphins, a little bit longer because the Jimmy years led into the Dave Wannstedt years. So the Dolphins were competitive until 2003. Ricky goes off to a tent in 2004. And then you've had a series of mishaps since. The Saban era doesn't work. The Parcells era doesn't work. The Gase era doesn't work. The Philbin era. Why the hell was that guy hired? Okay. All the things. Dan Campbell. Okay. All this just trash for 20 years, right? Just like the Knicks, right? And then what happens, though, is occasionally one of the two franchises will have a decent season. Dolphins had it last year. The Knicks are coming off of one, right? Here's what I would tell you. If you go to our other sponsor up here in the corner, BetUS, I always point the wrong way, and you use the code 5, bet against the Knicks this year. Bet the under. They're the Dolphins. The Dolphins are the Knicks, okay? It's 1 year up, and then it's total overachieving, okay? Total overachieving. Thank you. Yes, that's the correct code. 5. No, it's not. It's not. Manny. We're confusing codes. That's underdog. It's 5. F-I-V-E. They're the same thing. They'll have a year where they'll overachieve. For the Knicks, they overachieved because it was a weird season, okay? They got more from Randall than anybody could have expected. He crashed to earth in the playoffs. I actually think their roster is better this year than it was last year, just like I thought that the Dolphins roster this year was better than it was last year, and it didn't matter because last year, as it's proven with the Dolphins, was fluky. Why was it fluky? For the same reason that the 2008 Dolphins season was fluky, okay? Turnovers. The 2008 season, the Dolphins did not commit turnovers. Chad Pennington managed that thing perfectly. Yes, a lot of that is skill. I get it. But a lot of cases, turnovers are luck. This whole thing about how coaches talk about if we win the turnover battle, well, that's great, okay? But if the fumble bounces a certain way, you're not winning the turnover battle, right? There's a certain amount that you can cause. Interceptions, in part, caused by good coverage, okay, and all the rest of this, not making bad decisions if you're the quarterback or the receiver, being on the same page. You can control it to a degree, but not completely. Tip balls are tip balls, okay? And so the Dolphins in 2008 benefited from the fact that they committed no turnovers. They set a record for fewest turnovers. It was an easy bet against them in 2009. And they crashed back to earth. What did they go, 7-9, I think, right? After winning the division? Last year, it was the other way. The Dolphins, it's not that they didn't commit a ton of turnovers. They really didn't. But they forced turnovers in every game. They were one of the best turnover teams in the league. And so what's happened? Okay, they're not getting them this year. Nobody's talking about that. Everybody's talking about Tua. The defense is not forcing turnovers. Now, part of it is I don't really think his head's been in it when he's played this year, okay? He was awful against Tampa, but he was also banged up, and then he didn't play in the last game. They're not forcing turnovers. Yeah, the Tropical Swarm shirt is in the back of my car. I promise you it's still there. It actually moved, Manny, from one car to another. I traded in my car for another car. The Tropical Swarm shirt is still in the back of the car. I should have left it in the car I traded in. So that's the thing about this. Like, it was fluky. With the Knicks, okay, what was fluky with the Knicks? More so the season. I mean, they competed defensively. They couldn't score. But they got to a higher seed than they should have because the Heat didn't play the way that they should have played. And I think the Knicks will crash, like the Dolphins have crashed. And then there'll be another evaluation in New York about what it is that they have to do. And just like right now, there's an evaluation in Miami about what they need to do. And what we're going to get into with Lewis is this. It is time for some truth, okay? Dave Wannstedt was mocked at a press conference for saying we're close. And this was after they were not close, okay? And I remember the press conference specifically, and I wrote a column about it. And I liked Dave, but I gave it to Dave in the column because anyone with a brain could look at the team and say they weren't that close at that stage, okay? This team is not close to anything. Nothing. Zilch, okay? And it's not Tua's fault. There are very few blue chip players on this roster. I mean, you could argue there's one. And that one doesn't really seem that into it this year and now is banged up. It's not a blue chip roster. You went into this season, you're like, if Devontae Parker is a top 5 player on your team, there's a problem. Because you can't rely on him. So I think there needs to be a serious evaluation now, okay, not just of where things went wrong and who they're going to fire, but a serious evaluation of the talent on the roster and say, okay, is any of this going to progress to a point where you can perceive this team as being close to competitive? I'm watching these games. Like, okay, you watched the Titans and the Bills last night, okay? Are the Dolphins close to that? I mean, anywhere in the same stadium? I mean, you watch, I mean, again, there are teams that have risen up past the Dolphins, like, say, the Cardinals, okay, or others. Are the Dolphins close to them right now? No. You are what your record says you are, but more importantly, you are what your point differential says you are, okay? And they are with Houston, behind the Jets, behind Detroit, behind Jacksonville. Like, you can't sugarcoat this in any way and say, well, if we just fix this, if we just do this harder, if we do whatever. No. They're a bad football team. And, the reality is they probably weren't as good as we thought they were last year. But the turnovers tilted it. And so here we are. So before I bring Lewis on here, a couple words of advice. One, you're going to go to BetUS. You're going to use that code 5, and you're going to bet the under on the Knicks this year. The under. I don't even know what the number is. I think it's 44.5, something like that. Go under. I don't care what you do with the Heat. Go under on the Knicks. You're going to make money on that. I'm telling you, okay? They're a play-in team. They are the Dolphins, okay? They're the Dolphins. Do what I should have done, which was go under on the Dolphins this year at 9.5. I mean, are they getting to 5.5? Okay? So that's what we're telling you to do. Go to BetUS and do that. And the second thing that you're going to do is you're going to play Underdog Fantasy and compete with us. in the NBA tournament, and that is 5RSN. All right, now we're going to bring on our guy. Wrote a column that's got a little bit of attention here, and actually he and I are fairly aligned on this stuff. Some stuff Lewis and I may argue about, but this we don't. And he just got a retweet from some of the mainstream guys yesterday, so people paid attention to the piece. We're going to bring on our guy, Louis Sung. He's the host of our post-game show, The Final Yard, which is not a position that I envy these days. I'm sorry for this. Always better to be on the pregame show because the postgame show is fun if you just want to rip and roll, but like the pregame show, like there's hope. There's not a lot of hope here right now. But I want to introduce the column. He does look defeated. I'm sorry, he never looked this defeated. You can follow him again at Louis D. Sung on Twitter. But Louis, I want to get into your column because I agree with this entirely, and you kind of spread it out to the whole roster. I have been saying repeatedly that the single biggest mistake that they made was not getting veterans on the offensive line. I feel like that was number one. I don't even care if a guy's elite. They just needed two competent guys who knew how to play so that you wouldn't have to feature four young guys that you're rotating all over the place. But your larger point is that they kind of neglected this around the whole roster and really around the whole program right now. There's not a lot of experienced coaching voices. There's not a lot of experienced players. It's just like they just went young, and they're paying the price for it.
Well, first I'm going to address Manny's thing. It's not that I'm defeated so much. I just rolled out of bed, so my eyeballs are like desperately trying to like open up all the way. But anyway, yeah, that's basically my entire point with the column is that they decided to forego the idea of a veteran presence like anywhere on this football team. Mm-hmm. And when I say veteran presence, I don't mean players who are old. You can have old players, but there's a difference between old players and players who are on the older side, but have proven track record of being good, of being mentor types. They were once really good players who are now not quite as good as they once were, but are still decent and can still contribute, but now have knowledge and technique and experience that they can pass on to the younger generation. So that was my main point. And that's something that I guess the Dolphins felt like they didn't need, because now they have this situation that they're in where Coach Flores is basically saying, we don't need that. We have a great coaching staff and we'll be able to coach these guys up. No problem. At the time and granted, at the time, particularly with Eric Flowers, they traded him. They basically paid him to leave. Yeah. And I was scratching my head about that because I'm like, why would you do that? At the worst, he's a depth player, but I didn't really mind it so much at the time because watching them two play last year, him and Solomon Kinley seemed to be comparable in performance. But who knows? Maybe that has something to do with the fact that Eric Flowers was tutoring him a little bit. Maybe that's why they were both playing similarly, because Solomon Kinley was basically emulating Eric Flowers. Who knows? But now, whatever change they've made, putting in Lemuel Jean-Pierre in there as their offensive line coach, promoting him from an assistant, that's his first year doing it, if I'm not mistaken. His first year being a full-on offensive line coach. There are a lot of guys who are first-time coaches on there now. Godsey has been an offensive coordinator before, if I'm not mistaken, but this is the first year that Stoodsville has done it, I think. And, of course, the whole Charlie Fry, he's a new voice in there. He knows Tua well, but that's about all there is to it. So, once again, there's nothing that you can look at on this coaching staff. There's nothing besides Jason McCourty that you can look at on this football team that says, yes, he's proven it. He's done it. He knows what it takes. He knows how to handle it. Brian Flores is the one exception to the rule, but only because he's been in New England all those years. But even then, he was never a defensive coordinator for more than one season before they decided, you know what, this is it. And to his credit, having the new voice in there, stripping the roster down, making it so that there were zero expectations, it was easy to fool ourselves into believing they were overachieving. But now it's plainly obvious that they need somebody in there who can actually tutor these guys beyond the usual coaching shtick. They need somebody who knows what they're doing, knows what works, knows how to adapt, which they don't have, And yes, I truly believe they need veteran players in there who can take these young guys aside and say, listen, kid, let me show you how it's done. I'll take you under my wing. Who's taking anybody under their wing? Jesse Davis? I don't want anybody learning from Jesse Davis. Jesse Davis is probably the worst lineman on the whole team right now.
Right.
So,
but Louis, isn't it arrogance? I mean, I everything you're kind of describing is arrogance. It's like they started to believe their own BS. Like I feel like they got caught up in what they were doing. And I wonder if part of it is the Patriot way, because in New England, they've always had veteran players, but they've also done this thing where they've gotten rid of them 1 year early instead of 1 year late, right? Like that's always been the Belichick philosophy. And the point from Clemente is right. No Van Noy, no McCain, no Eric Flowers. Like and you're right. They don't have to be elite players. Like that's not what you're talking about. They just have to be competent and experienced and tough and know kind of the tricks of the trade. And they don't, you're right, they don't have anybody on this team. And I mean, to me, the receiver room is the perfect example, right? I mean, the one guy you can rely on right now is the rookie. Like you can't, anybody else, we talked about the veterans in that room. Like, what are you learning from Devontae Parker when he's not on the field? Okay. What are you learning from Preston Williams? That he hasn't proven anything because he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Albert Wilson has been, again, that is another example of don't believe anything you see in training camp, okay? Because this happens. I mean, it is the J.R. Tolver Award, as CK says, okay, or the Robert Baker Award, where it's receiver pops in training camp. And you never, Legadou Nene, okay, you never hear from the guy again, right? That's what Omar's favorite.
Clyde Gates.
There's always that guy. Okay, now with Albert, I think we believed it a little bit more. Learn how to ride a bike with Parker. I mean, I feel like we believed it a little bit more with Albert because we saw it prior to the injuries, but obviously he hasn't come back the same way. They neglected it everywhere, and it's a feature, not a bug, Louis. Like they did it intentionally. Like that's the whole thing. And you're right. I mean, even the way they go through coaches, this idea that you could just promote two guys who've never, I mean, Godsey did it briefly, but not well, right? Like two guys who've never really done this before.
Proven.
Is insane.
Yeah, proven.
And just to make one analogy here to the other team in town, there is a reason Udonis Haslem keeps getting contracts, okay, into his 40s now, even though he's not going to play. It's because Udonis could pull a guy aside in the locker room and says, that's not how we do things here. They don't have that voice in the Dolphins room. So let's pivot a little bit. So how do they fix that? Because you can't fix it during the season, right? So and like Phyllis, so what are they going to do? Just go spend their money in free agency on some middling free agents who've done it? Like, what is the fix now?
There is no fix for this season, as far as I'm concerned. I wrote that there was hope for the Dolphins, but the problem is that hope is assuming that they come to their senses and realize that what they have is not going to cut it. Now, I don't believe for 1 second that they're going to do that. I firmly believe they're going to go ahead and stick with what they've got, for better or worse, and they're going to crash and burn because of it. Tua Tagovailoa, poor guy, he went from Alabama, the best team in the nation, to Miami, literally at this point, the worst team in the nation. Even Detroit, you can kind of hang your hat and say, okay, there's a chance they might win something somewhere down the line. But Miami, like I complained about this in week 1 after beating New England. There's something to be said about style points, and this team doesn't have it. And when good teams win in style, that's just how it is. So, and you can get mad at me and say a win is a win, whatever. I've had it every year that I've ever complained about style points. Every year they tell me it's the same thing, but you know what? It always turns out to be right. Good teams win with style. They just do. Now, the fix, if we really want to have a chance at doing anything, and I do mean anything, this season, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to revisit my trade proposal from earlier this season. Everybody mocked me for trade Devontae Parker and a pick of some kind to the Lions for Taylor Decker. Get that left tackle spot fixed up. See if Mitchell Schwartz is healthy. The dude's got to be like okay by now. I just think that nobody wants to sign him in for whatever money he's looking for. But you know what? Sign Mitchell Schwartz, right tackle gets taken care of. Jesse Davis goes to the bench or to guard, whatever. And as a guard, Davis isn't quite as bad. You can at least remove Austin Jackson from that equation after that. So then you don't have to worry about that. But In doing so, not only will you be actually getting bad players not to play anymore, but you'll be giving them some kind of a mentor type that says, okay, listen, young buck, I see that you've been struggling. Let me go ahead and show you how I do things, because I've done it forever and a half. And that's why I still get to get $6-7 million contracts, even though I've been sitting here on my butt for the past several months. So that's the kind of thing they need. Now, are they going to do it? No. So, and that is the hubris of Brian Flores. Arrogance and pride have been the downfall of the past two regimes, both Adam Gase, and I think it's going to do the same for Brian Flores. And that in and of itself is going to be the problem. They think they're so special. They think they're untouchable. They think that they know what's best. And even though Flores doesn't sound as nasty about it as Adam Gase was, because Gase would call you out and say, y'all are a bunch of idiots, I'm the smartest guy in the room. Flores does it in a more subtle way. He never says that you're dumb for seeing this. It's just that he kind of gives you this impression of, listen, I'm okay with what happened. It is what it is. We'll fix it. Don't worry about it. He kind of like tries to brush it off instead of like stabbing you with your own words.
Well, and a couple of things on this, this idea of mentorship and why it matters. I mean, I remember Jason Taylor during the Saban years, okay, and Jason had been through a whole bunch of stuff, and obviously Nick took to Jason, and Jason became his ally in the locker room, whereas Zach was not a fan of Saban, as we know, and others, okay, but Jason was, right. But I remember Saban brought in, and whatever happened to the Saban tenure or what it would have become if they made the right quarterback decision or if he'd been committed to it or if his wife liked it here, whatever, okay? But the point is, Saban brought in, like they had that defense. I wrote a story where I sat with the guys in the defensive line room, okay, for an hour and just shot the bleep with them, okay? That room was Keith Traylor, Vonnie Holliday, Kevin Carter, okay? And I'm watching Jason Taylor in that room, like looking up to these guys, like because even though Jason was the only Hall of Famer of the bunch, okay, but he had such regard and respect for Carter and Holiday and Traylor and the other vets. I think Jeff Skanina was in that room. The other vets that were in that room, that you could just see it. And you could see that Jason was learning things from these guys every day, even though, again,
and that's after Jason already kind of emerged at that point.
Oh, he way past emerged. I mean, he'd already had his 18.5 sack season, okay, under Dave, okay, but he was still learning. Like there was still value he got from being around those guys, okay, or even like, I remember when Surtain and Madison came in, and yeah, T-Buck didn't want to lose his job, okay, but there were things that Surtain and Madison picked up from Terrell Buckley. Like, again, that has to be passed down. There's no one to pass it down here. Like, and this is part of, I think, and this happened in the NBA too with the Philadelphia 76ers. This is part of the fallacy of the teardown, okay? Is when you do I think Cleveland has done it better because Dorsey's done a better job with it since he took over for Sashi Brown, okay? When you tear things down and you go totally young, you strip the locker room of those guys to learn from, and then the young players don't get better, okay? And I feel like that's what's happening. It's easy to tear shit down, okay? What Chris Greer did is not hard. Like, you will find, you can trade good players for picks. It's not the, but being able to build, they forgot the human part, I think. Like, right? And if it's all analytics and all trying to win the trade, you lose the human part. And that's, I think, what we're seeing right now is players are not developing. They're not getting, who's getting better? Who has gotten better since last year? Anybody?
Tua.
And he's the one getting killed, like literally and figuratively, right?
But
He's gotten better.
Fitzpatrick for a little while, at least. He had Fitzpatrick for a little while.
Yeah. Who else has gotten better? I mean, Jalen Phillips seems to be getting better a little bit during the season, which is natural. Maybe Waddle will get better. But the 2020 draft class, who's getting better? None of them are getting better. It's to the point when, and I'm not going to use Charles Harris as an example, but I will. Okay, I'm watching Charles Harris perform. I'm watching Kalen Ballage perform. Freaking Ballage. Like, something is happening here. And again, to compare to another team in town, when we don't like to compare teams, the Hurricanes, it's the same thing. They come here 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, Lewis. They don't get better. Maybe it's not the players they're picking. Maybe it's the way that they're trying to develop them.
You need guys who can come in there and be like, let me show you how. It's very simple. I remember here. Let's move a more recent example, because you're talking about guys who have been mentors. You talked about Madison and Surtain with Terrell Buckley. I'll go even further. I remember when the Dolphins brought in Cortland Finnegan, and I got killed for that one too, because it's like, Cortland Finnegan can't play. He sucks. He's awful. Blah blah blah. Yeah, he wasn't that great, but then you know what? He had something to offer from the mental side of things. He brought an attitude. He brought knowledge. Like, I was once a really good NFL cornerback. Let me show you what I did. Even if he couldn't physically do it anymore, he's not like the knowledge goes away. Just like J.J. Watt now in Arizona. J.J. Watt doesn't even have a sack yet this season, if I'm not mistaken. But you're going to tell me that J.J. Watt has nothing to offer from the mental side of things, something that he can't show this younger guy and say, let me show you why my name is J.J. Watt. I'm going to turn you into the next guy. Jason Taylor, and you brought up Jason Taylor. Listen, he learned from Skolnick and Kevin Carter and all those guys. And then in the twilight of his career, he took all that and got to pass it on to who? Cameron Wake.
Right.
So that has something.
And then Cam did later in his career with others. Okay, Olivier Vernon, etc. I mean that they were. I mean there is a natural pecking order to this thing. And the Dolphins, in my view, and I got one more thing for you after the break here. The Dolphins, in my view, tried to shortcut the process. They've tried to skip the steps, and I think they're paying for it now. And it's just remarkable what you're saying. The one guy getting better is the one guy who's being blamed for everything, which is it's beyond me at this point. All right. You will not blame us if you go to You Break Wheel Fix. Go to You Break Wheel Fix in North Miami. This is where you go to get your wheels refinished, get them repaired. The roads of South Florida are terrible. You know that, particularly in certain areas of 95 these days. It's just like just swerving around basically to get to the express lane. You Break Wheel Fix is where you go to get your wheels again repaired, but also refinished. You can use the Dolphin colors if you like. You can get the Heat colors, the old Vice colors, which I guess have been put out to pasture at this point. They've got over 5,000 custom colors. So make your car stand out, make your wheels stand out. Mention 5 reasons to Mark and everybody else down there, and you are going to get 15% off your entire order. So go to youbreakwheelfix.com. That's youbreakwheelfix.com. They're based right in the Miami Shores area, not that far actually from I-95. So go to YouBreak Wheel Fix. All right, Lewis, we're going to close here. It's the Dolphins' luck that they have this kind of season when they got to play 17, which just prolongs the agony at this point. But give me your best case scenario, not record wise. Give me your best case scenario for this season. Like, what, in your view, like if it happens, you're like, okay, we salvaged something.
I mean, I think honestly, it boils down to this. Assuming the Dolphins just absolutely wreck this season, let's say they go 1-16, like they don't win a single game all year long. Once again, I come back to the style points, and this is where it matters. If you have your quarterback, and this is going to be the main difference maker, it really is. If you have your quarterback in Tua and he performs, let's say he doesn't do enough to get them to win the games because the rest of the team around him just is incompetent. Let's say the defense completely falls apart. Byron Jones and Xavier Howard are never healthy. They can never do what they're supposed to do. They can't make turnovers because they're just attacking the other player. Whatever. Fine. Tua is the only thing that matters this season. Tua has to perform. Tua has to look good. If he makes a couple mistakes here and there, I'm not going to look at it and be like, he blew it. He blew his chance. At least that's not me. Some folks are already writing him off because he's not Dan Marino. And you know what? If you're looking for Dan Marino and you're saying Justin Herbert this, Justin Herbert that, sorry, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. The way that this team coaches, the way that this team performs on a day-to-day basis, Herbert is better for what? 3 more wins? Maybe. Even then, that gives you, right now it gives you 4-4, but that's about it. That's 3 more wins. You got your 3 more wins. So the rest of the season is still not going to look good. So Herbert is the better quarterback right now. Tua, and we knew this going in, and that's the problem, is that we knew this going in and we didn't want to believe it because we were hoping that instant gratification would happen. Tua is the kind of quarterback that you need to be patient with him, because if you're going to call him the left-handed Drew Brees, you have to remember the trajectory of Drew Brees' career. It took year 5 and 6
Right.
before Drew Brees became Hall of Fame Drew Brees. It just
Well,
did.
and also, I mean, the other guy who he's compared to in some ways, which is Russell Wilson, although he doesn't have some of the improvisational stuff that Russ has. I mean, look at Russ's numbers from his first couple of years. I mean, they didn't trust him really until year 3 to really do anything. That was a running game based team, running game and defense. Marshawn Lynch and the Legion of Boom. That's what they relied on there. You thought you had the secondary this year. They've never addressed the running back position. They just don't seem to care about it. And it's what's amazing to me, and Gaskin's okay, but like the Ravens are literally pulling backs off the street. I mean, literally, and they're the best team in the AFC right now, or at least they've looked like the best team lately. It's just like you watch these other teams doing more with less, and that is what's frustrating. It's
Coaching.
I hate to say it, but like I say, that I feel like the Hurricanes and Dolphins are mirroring each other, and it's hard to watch right now. All right,
Ethan, can I ask you one question before we go?
Yes.
Is Tua better than Andy Dalton was when he was in Cincy?
Yes.
Go get Marvin Lewis next season.
That's interesting. And Marvin hasn't been. Yeah, we're going to start talking about names. I mean, Marvin. Doug Peterson idea doesn't do a lot for me, but he's won a Super Bowl, so I mean, there is an experience level there. I really wish you could make. Yeah, man, he popped in there. I would like to see. The problem is what this team really could use, and it's never going to happen because he's not going to accept a demotion. Is I'd love to have Brian Flores as your defensive coordinator. I think right now as a head coach. I think he's suffering from the same thing as his players are suffering from, and we'll close here. He doesn't have anybody to mentor him in there either, and the Jim Caldwell thing, is unfortunate because I feel like that would have been helpful, but he doesn't have anybody in there. He's sort of the king of that staff, and at this point, it's not working out as well as I'd hoped. All right, follow him at Louis D. Sung. Follow him on the post-game show. By week 12, you're going to need hazard pay. I don't. We'll you know what? We'll just put you on autopilot. You could just recycle the same takes by week 12 if that's where we're at. I'll be back tomorrow. The Heat start on Thursday. I'm going to bring one of my guys in from 5 on the floor if I can get either of them to wake up. And we'll talk about the Heat season as we go forward. Follow our sponsors, betus.com. Use the code 5, Underdog Fantasy. Use the code 5RSN. And, of course, mention 5 reasons when you go to You Break Wheel Fix. Thanks, Manny.